Well, hello there my fellow rushers, King Rexy here, and today we're going to be reviewing a hero named Atlantius. Oh yeah, I can already guarantee you that he's going to be in the best tier. Just kidding, King Rexy isn't here, but his blood, sweat, and tears are, and they're present in his redesign of Ashbite, known as Atlantius. King Rexy and I had an idea to redesign some of the heroes from the Kingdom Rush series that we thought were a little bit underwhelming. For example, I chose to take Mirage and redo her stats and abilities so that way she could function and play a little bit better and be more fun to use in Kingdom Rush Frontiers. King Rexy did the same for Ashbite, and he made the water dragon Atlantius, who I'm going to be giving a thorough review as if he was an actual hero in the Kingdom Rush series. King Rexy is going to be doing the same for my rework of Mirage, so make sure to go to his channel, watch that video, like the video, comment on the video, save the video to a playlist, subscribe to his channel, ring the bell, and donate your life savings to King Rexy. Now, without further ado, let's review Atlantius. First, let's take a look at Atlantius' backstory. Atlantius is a dragon who has once been the guardian of a city named Rework. He was a long, deep blue colored dragon who didn't need wings to hover over the city and keep it protected under his vigilant eye. How he was able to fly was a secret of which only the elders of the King's Council were aware of. Atlantius had a gift from Regnos that gave him both gales and lungs so that he can go on land if necessary. But his most noticeable feature was his two cyan-colored eyes. With them, he could see miles away, and he had perfect night vision. He didn't have any legs, but he had two small arms, which he used to grab things. They were small but very powerful. Also, he had a big, lemon-green spike sticking out of his back at the end of his tail. Everyone in the city was enjoying themselves, knowing that Atlantius was going to protect them from the terrifying monsters lurking below the ocean. Little did they know that one fateful day, everything was going to be taken away from them. On this day, the Deep Devils coordinated an attack on the city, but this assault was just a distraction to make Atlantius abandon his true mission, which was given to him by Regnos himself many centuries ago. They snuck in the middle of the night, protected by the shadows of the dark water. The Greenfins were ordered by their leader to commence an attack at the opposite side of the city, while a small group of loyal Red Spines were going to intrude the city without getting noticed. This task would never be achieved due to Atlantius' impeccable night vision. However, a wandering bluegale, who was known as Flyin, discovered a mysterious potion. He found it falling from the heavens above by what can only be described as a metal giant. Unfortunately for him, most of the liquid was already spilled out due to the heavy impact. Still, with some quick thinking, the bluegale was able to obtain some of it. The amount of liquid wasn't a lot, but Flyin had saved up just enough for 3 people to take it, and so their plan had started. When Atlantius noticed the school of fish coming towards the left side of Rework, he immediately let out a warning call. Within the blink of an eye, the military forces of the city were gathered up and prepared for the assault, unsuspecting of an additional assault. The potion that was found had the incredible property to make the one who drinks it invisible for a short period of time. The assault had to continue for as long as possible in order for the Red Spines to accomplish their mission. After being given the mysterious juice, they became invisible to the naked eye. Atlantius passed by right after they consumed it. He just flew by them, like they were non-existent. With some words being exchanged between the Red Spines, they emerged out of the water and settled their feet into the dock of the city. The trio of Red Spines snuck into the citadel, unnoticed by the civilians. Due to the huge assault of Greenfins, the whole military was called to help fend off against the seemingly endless swarm of fish. In the citadel, they found what they were looking for. The eldest daughter of the king was kneeling down in front of the shrine of Regnos. She was tall, with long golden locks of hair that would have made even the sun fill up with jealousy, and 2 big beautiful deep blue eyes, just like the endless ocean surrounding the city. Her name was Eleanor. She was praying to Regnos for his wisdom and blessing and protection from their enemy. However, there were 2 guards who were tasked with protecting the princess. They had both long and short swords. The protectors were dressed up with armor from head to toe, but there was one area that stayed unprotected: their faces. It all happened so fast. The sworn defenders didn't even know what was coming for them. In one moment, they were chatting about their wife's beauty. In the next, both of them had a gaping hole in their faces with blood squirting out. The Red Spines were perfect hunters. They always made sure to kill their prey instantly. Before their bodies could collapse to the floor alerting the princess, 2 of the group caught them up in their hands and gently put them down to the ground. The last Red Spine, the leader of the team, began making his way towards the shrine. Focused on her prayers, Eleanor didn't notice the light, but barely audible footsteps. And then, out of nowhere, the red spine pierced her chest with his spear. Eleanor didn't even have a moment to scream. She left only a long, agonizing sigh before she crumbled to the floor, with blood leaking out of her titties. Without any hesitation, the trio took her and started making their way back to the ocean. However, the potion was starting to lose its effect on them. After being a few meters away from the ocean, they became visible once again. But before they could jump in the water, one of the citizens saw them while they were escaping with the princess over the shoulder of the red spine who was at the back. When she was hit with that sight, she got on her horse and started racing towards the far left side of Riley. After a few minutes, she arrived at the battlefront. When the guard saw her, she was shaking profusely, and there was a pure look of terror in her eyes. When one of them asked her what had happened, she stumbled over her words, but with some of her composure returning, she told him about what she saw. After this short conversation, the guard jumped on his own horse and started making his way towards the palace. He rushed through the gates and demanded to talk with the king. When the king came in, he started complaining about how this stupid expendable dared to awaken the ruler of Riley out of his slumber without even sending him a telegram. Before he could continue with his ramblings, the guard looked him directly in the eyes and yelled, "Your daughter has been captured by those dang devils. If we don't stop them, they will unleash the beast and no one will survive his wrath." At first, the king looked confused, but after taking one short glance at the soldier's face, he noticed that there was no sign of lying or joking. His face was dead serious and filled with concern. After noticing that, he immediately started running towards the tower, where a big, coral-made horn was located. If he blows the horn, Atlantius will arrive at the castle in no time. After he got up to the tower, he took a long breath and blew the horn with all of his might, and Atlantius could be seen hovering over the city in the distance. Even though the dragon couldn't speak, he was able to communicate with telepathy. The mighty dragon read through the king's mind and realized what happened. Within a short moment, he flew out of the city and started flying towards the endless ocean. He knew what was coming, and he was going to do everything in his power to prevent it. Meanwhile, deep below the ocean, there was a creature of monstrous proportions being held in the deepest part of the sea. This creature was known as the Leviathan, a mythical beast who caused havoc everywhere he went. His raid was devastating, but Ragnos was able to overpower him and imprisoned him in a big metal sphere. This sphere was strong, and nothing could even leave as much as a scratch on it. However, there was one way that this beast could be left free: sacrifice from the royal family. The creature has been sealed away from the world for a long, long time, his anger and bloodlust growing by the minute. He wanted nothing more than to break free out of his shackles and obliterate the ones who imprisoned him. Today was the day that he would break free. The red spine swam over to his prison and stopped at the edge of it. Then, an elderly bluegill came and started chanting words from a language that was long forgotten. After his chant was over, the red spines threw Eleanor over the edge and she sunk deep into the endless chasm. A few moments later, a loud, earth-shattering roar shacked the ocean floor. The Leviathan was finally free. Without any time for the deep devils to react, the mystical beast started swimming towards the surface. They followed him shortly after a quick, victorious scream. The giant octopus emerged out of the water, filled with fury. Atlantius had arrived too late. The beast had already been let loose. His deep-seeing eyes met with the 6 glowing eyes of the monster. He knew that he wasn't going to take him down alone. Due to the assault of the Greenfins earlier, his force was starting to fade away. Regardless of his condition, he had only one goal in mind: to protect Riley at all costs. With a mighty roar, he jumped into the water and started making his way towards the Leviathan. The monster let out a much louder roar that shook Atlantius to his core, but he didn't give up. The dragon started calling for support, and 12 little dragons appeared out of the dragon's majestic body. They were linked to his heart. They tried their best to distract the monster, but the Leviathan annihilated most of them. Only 3 of them were able to escape and retreat into Atlantius' heart. The battle lasted many hours, but one unfortunate move turned the tides. Atlantius was at the brink of his power, and with one leap towards the monster's side, he didn't see the tentacle coming towards him from below. He was caught and lifted towards the Leviathan's face. Atlantius was struggling to get free, but to no avail. The grip of this monster was too strong for Atlantius' exhausted body to handle. Then, the monster looked him straight in the eyes. His stare was cold, cruel, straight up evil. After this short moment of silence, the monster started squeezing the dragon. He let out a shriek filled with agony and pain. Atlantius' fragile body started to give up against the Leviathan's strong grip. After a few moments, which felt like a small eternity, the monster threw Atlantius' body into the ocean. After his body sunk deep into the murky depths of the sea, he started making his way, along with the deep devil tides, towards the city. Atlantius had failed. However, by some miracle, he regained consciousness. The world was as black as the deep ends of space. He was laying at the bottom of the ocean. His body ached at every slight movement, and, around his torso, there were marks left from the beast's tentacle. This would stand as a reminder of his failure. After a few minutes, Atlantius was able to rise up, and he swam to the top. Even in this state, he knew that something was very wrong. His senses were telling him that the city was in grave danger. He started swimming towards Riley as fast as his injured body could go. After a while, he started approaching the city, but when he arrived, his heart was filled with sorrow. The whole town was in ruins. There was nothing left out of this majestic place. No buildings, no statues, no survivors. His mission had failed. His whole body was shaking with anger and lust for revenge. But there was a small and soft voice deep down in his soul which told him otherwise. Atlantius couldn't defeat the Leviathan by himself. He needed some help. He needed brave heroes. The weak dragon started swimming towards the Zaraphos River, where he was going to seek help from Hammerhold. After a couple of days, filled with the danger of being captured by the Devil Tide's patrols, Atlantius finally made it to the river. Sadly, his body couldn't keep going any longer. He was hungry and exhausted. The majestic dragon collapsed onto the shore. Suddenly, he opened his eyes to see that there was a big, muscular figure looking over him. The dragon felt threatened for a moment, but then he started reading the mind of this man. He saw that he was one of the heroes of Hammerhold. This man was Ulrich, the last desert warrior. With some help from him, Atlantius rose up from the ground and explained what happened to his city. Ulrich wasn't going to let these monsters rule the ocean, so he agreed to help him to get his revenge on those slugs who took everything away from him. After a few days of proper treatment, Atlantius had fully recovered. Now he is ready to get back to the place he once knew as home, to unleash his godly wrath upon the deep devils, and to banish the Leviathan once and for all. After reading that lore, the first thing that I have to say is that I really like how Atlantius is tied to the Rising Tides mini-campaign. Since he's supposed to be a replacement for Ashbite, this means that, hypothetically, he would be one of the two dragons in Kingdom Rush Frontiers, and as a result, he's obviously going to be compared to the other dragon in that game, that being Boneheart. And since Boneheart is very closely tied to the Shadow Moon campaign, King Rexy capitalized on the contrast between the two dragons by making Atlantius based on the other mini-campaign in Frontiers, which was Rising Tides. So I really like that. The other thing that I really like about his story is how the dragon is hyped up to be this very powerful, yet still good creature, and he's weakened during his story, so that when you're using this almighty powerful dragon, you're just imagining how much stronger he was in his glory days. Although it says that he does recover and such, I like to at least believe that he was even stronger before this, since after all, he still has some scars left over from Leviathan. So it's just a fun little thing to imagine while you're using the dragon to make him feel all that more awesome and epic. You can really feel the passion in the writing when you read it, which I think will put a smile on anyone's face. Now, let's look at his stats and abilities to see how Atlantius would operate in-game in combat. King Rexy has provided us with an entire table showing what all of his stats would be at every single level. You can see that he starts with a lot of health, pretty good regeneration. It would take him about 20 seconds to fully heal from low HP. He's got a very minor amount of armor, and as you can see, he has high true damage with his base attack, but he only attacks every 2 seconds, so that significantly lowers his DPS. He also has slow movement speed and a 25-second respawn rate. So this helps him stand out a lot from Boneheart right away, just looking at that respawn rate, because it's slightly faster than Boneheart's. So that's just a little bit of a way to make him stick out already. Now, because he has slow movement and attack speed, that also matches up with Boneheart, but the difference here is that he has this high damage, true damage base attack. Now, there's no indication that it deals area damage, so I'm going to assume that it does single target damage. In case you don't know how to calculate damage per second, what you do is you take the damage and you divide it by the number of seconds that it takes to attack. That's what damage per second means. So 50 minimum damage divided by 2 is 25 damage, and 90 maximum damage is 45 damage when divided by 2. So his base attack deals 25 to 45 true damage on average per second, which is pretty good considering that it deals true damage. Compare that to Dante, who does more damage per second, but it's physical. So there's a little bit of competition there over what you would want. Some more universal damage that isn't as high, or some extra high damage, but it's physical damage when you're using Dante. So that's just an extra little comparison that you would have to make when deciding what hero to use if Atlantius was in the game. Now if you look at his health, he has 650 HP, which matches Boneheart's, but he also has 20% armor. Now what you want to look at here is effective HP. Effective HP is how much damage you would have to deal to that unit to deplete all of its health, given that its armor is reducing the damage that you're dealing, or magic resistance, but in this case it's armor. Because he has 20% armor and 650 HP, his effective HP is 812.5, which means that a unit would have to deal about 813 physical damage in order to bring him down from full HP. This is pretty unrealistic for most units to be able to do, so it basically just means that Atlantius is unkillable. This is fine with me, since dragons or any flying unit can't block other units that are on the ground, so it's not like he's going to become a super tank because of this. It just means that ranged units are going to have that much more trouble killing him, which in turn means that he's going to be able to deal his damage a lot more easily. He's not going to be in danger of getting killed by things unless he's being targeted by a bunch of death coils, or he's really close to abominations, both of which deal true damage to him. However, he does have a niche usefulness against the spears that red spines throw, which do deal physical damage, and it's high physical damage, so he's able to tank a little bit more of those. That's a nice touch, since his lore means that he's closely related to Rising Tides, and he's somewhat more useful in Rising Tides compared to Boneheart, just thanks to this alone. But now let's look at his abilities and see how much more useful he can be. His first ability, A Tsunami, summons a tidal wave that affects a large part of the track, just like Boneheart's Plague Carriers. It deals 150 true damage and stuns enemies for 4 seconds at max level, and it has an 18-second cooldown. Because it has the same range and cooldown as Plague Carriers, it's easy to compare to that ability. It's not going to deal as much damage as Plague Carriers, since it's not going to be carried by unstable disease. However, dealing 150 true damage to a large part of an entire track is definitely going to deal more than 1000 damage every time it's used, and 18 seconds is pretty frequent considering how huge that damage number is. On top of that, because it's going to deal a huge amount of damage but still not be able to wipe out most enemies, stunning them for 4 seconds is really handy because it renders them completely useless for those 4 seconds. Don't underestimate it just because it's easy to compare to one of the best skills in the series, that being Plague Carriers, because this skill is still extremely powerful and worthy of a dragon hero. His second ability, Driven by Revenge, is a passive skill that gives him 30% more armor whenever he's lost 40% or more of his maximum HP. I won't bore you with the math, but essentially what this does is increase his effective HP to more than 1100 against physical attacks. This just further exaggerates his niche against red spines and other physical ranged enemies compared to Boneheart, which helps him stand out as a dragon even more. His next ability is called Engulfing Whirlpool. It allows Atlantius to summon what I imagine is a moderately sized, circular-shaped AoE, much like Captain Blackthorn's Release the Kraken. It lasts for 6 seconds and stuns every enemy that walks into it for the remainder of the duration, dealing 35 true damage per second for a maximum of 210 true damage per target. The damage alone would make this a good area damage ability for sure, but the stun effect makes it even stronger. Now that he has 2 abilities with a stun, Atlantius can line up his skills for a total of 10 seconds of AoE stun, all while dealing relatively good true damage to the enemies. I really like it when skills are able to stack together, and this is a great example of what I mean. So I really like that both of these abilities are present on the same hero. His next skill is Call to Arms. At max level, Atlantius summons 3 miniature water dragons with 185 HP, 20% armor, and 25 to 50 physical area damage. I'm going to assume that these dragons are also flying units, since their damage is so high and they have an AoE. If they could block enemies, it would make it easy for all 3 dragons to hold enemies in place close enough together to take the area damage of each dragon. That would amount to 75 to 150 physical area damage per attack, which would be insane. But since I'm assuming that they don't do this, I'm not going to call the ability broken right away. As a matter of fact, it does have one downside despite its immense power. This is that the dragons last for 20 seconds, but they take 30 seconds to respawn. If you're relying on them to augment Atlantius' damage output, you've got 10 seconds where they're not active, and this 10-second gap happens every 30 seconds. If it's intentional, it means that the 10 seconds of total stun time that Atlantius can achieve with his other abilities can be used to buy time for the dragons to respawn. I imagine that this isn't going to be easy to pull off, but it's really cool to think about doing that in an actual level. Though, I would probably want to stun enemies while the dragons are active so that it can group up the enemies to take more area damage. This area damage is really high no matter what. Knowing that it will synergize so well with his other skills makes it feel like an Ice Cult tier ability, which is saying a lot compared to what Ashbite used to be. So, I ultimately do think that this is a broken ability for the area damage alone. The skill also comes with a safety net, where the dragons provide healing for each other when one dies. But I'm not going to make a big deal out of it being so broken. After all, he is a dragon, and on top of that, I'm more interested in cool ideas for gameplay. That's the most fun part about redesigning heroes. His final skill, Unstoppable Pressure, is a passive that applies a 35% slow effect to the enemies he hits with his basic attack. It has a 30% chance to stun them for 3 seconds, so I'm going to assume that the slow effect lasts for 3 seconds as well. Since he has a 2-second attack speed, it's possible for him to attack the same enemy before the slow effect wears off, or the stun effect. I don't know if the effect can stack, but I'm going to assume that it doesn't, since stuns and slows from the same sources don't usually stack like that. Rather than an attempt at pure damage, this ability allows him to delay enemies even more, which is really handy for a dragon who can't block enemies. It's also adding on to the already enormous stunning power that Atlantius has, so this skill wraps up that theme really nicely. Finally, let's look at King Rexy's explanation as to why he reworked Ashbite. So the main reason as to why I decided to rework him is pretty simple. He was the first dragon ever invented into the Kingdom Rush saga, so he should have been a memorable character. A hero who can rival the power of Shatra, Dante, probably Boneheart. But in reality, Ashbite was a massive disappointment of a hero. He's mediocre at most. His basic attacks deal true damage, but he has a very weird attack range, which makes the player position Ashbite in a goofy way so that he can attack consistently. His abilities are pretty underwhelming, excluding the Wildfire Barrage. Even though the targeting in this ability is questionable, the damage is good, it covers a decent area and it deals true damage. Still, I wanted a hero who is very strong and can be classified as one of the best, not one of the most underwhelming heroes. It isn't perfect, but I spent a lot of time writing his backstory and thinking about his stats and mechanics. After nearly 2,900 words, I hope that you will enjoy and appreciate my hero rework. Who knows, maybe one day we will get a water-based dragon. And if this happens, my heart will explode from pure joy. Thank you for reading through my Ashbite hero rework. Apologies in advance for my awful impersonation of King Rexy's words. I think that King Rexy did a really good job with this hero. Rather than try to compete with Boneheart's raw damage output, he instead made him able to stand out in his own way by giving Atlantius the ability to stun enemies very well. He does it so well that he's just as good at stalling enemies as Boneheart is at killing enemies, so he's able to compete with his other dragon in Frontiers without losing his own identity. And I think that that's the most important part of reworking Ashbite in particular, since he's a dragon who has to compete with Boneheart's existence. If I was to talk about balance, I would say that he actually ranks second best out of the 57 heroes in the series. So I actually do think that he's stronger than Boneheart, but not stronger than Ice Cult, which is a good thing because Ice Cult is so broken. Still though, he's an extremely powerful hero. He's mostly carried by the fact that he has a huge AoE true damage stun in most of his abilities, and the fact that he can summon those area damage dealing miniature dragons who are extremely powerful. I think that that is his best ability by far, and it's going to increase his DPS to something that's past any of the other heroes, all while dealing area damage. So I think that that carries him the most, but he is also still very powerful thanks to those other skills. This collaboration was a lot of fun. If you have an idea to rework a Kingdom Rush hero, or just an idea for a completely original hero and you want to share it, I might be willing to give it a review video just like this one. I'll do a little ASMR reading of the lore if the hero has any, and I'll do my best to correct any English mistakes along the way. I'll look at all of the stats and abilities and analyze how they might function in gameplay. I'll also give my honest feelings about what I like the most about the hero. If you want to share a hero with me, either join the official Ironhide Games Discord server or message me directly on Discord at Voduke #7849. I want this to be a fun thing that everyone can engage in. You don't have to worry about the lore being as long as King Rexy's or making the hero all that balanced. Just put together what you think is good and I'll let you know how good I think it is. I might even work on it with you before doing a video on it so that the hero can be the best it can possibly be when I review it. My hope is that this can light a spark in the Kingdom Rush community. Regardless, have a great day.